Tonight on Politics Unplugged, state lawmakers take another break while the rest of us have to wait. Donald Trump versus Elon Musk. Is this the worst breakup in modern political history? And what does the president's phone number have to do with Arizona politics? The two major Republican candidates running for governor just might say a whole lot. Our panel weighs in now on Politics Unplugged.
Good evening, I'm political editor Dennis Welch, and this is Politics Unplugged. And you'd be forgiven for thinking the legislative session might be over. Lawmakers have spent the better part of the past month on vacation, but the session isn't over, and they still have a lot of important tasks to deal with. And here to talk about that, Axios reporter Jeremy Duda. Thank you very much for being here. I'd say, hey, give us the latest on there, but not much happening. What's going on?
Kind of a hurry up and wait situation. The clock is ticking. They don't have a heck of a lot of time to get this done. The budget has to be passed by June 30th. We're just a few weeks away, but so far there is not really a lot of progress being made. And you not only have legislative Republicans and Governor Katie Hobbs not on the same page, you have the two legislative chambers, the Republicans in the House and Senate, not necessarily on the same page on everything as well. So it feels like they still got a lot to sort out.
Yeah, and for people tuning in, maybe not be familiar, what happens at June 30th if they don't get a budget passed?
Oh,
I know in the past they just covered the clocks and pretended that it never went to July 1st. But what could happen if they don't get something done?
Well, in theory, you're talking about a government shutdown. I mean, they would probably find a way to keep a lot of things going. A lot of things would temporarily halt, which maybe some people would not be super sad to see happen for a little while. But it's one of those things where pretty much every year you see that, oh, there's a threat of a shutdown, and they always get it done by June 30th, maybe the early morning hours of July 1st, but it always gets done.
They seem to always make the deadline, just like it's politics, right? Yeah. There's all this drama and there's build up to these deadlines, be it in Congress, be it at the state legislature. They always seem to hit that. So you mentioned that there's some differences there. We're hearing talk about a 90-90-90 plan. What that is the Senate gets $90 million to give to its members to decide how to appropriate that money. Same for the Senate, same for the governor. And the governor's office is always big on reminding me, well, it's a little bit more than $90 million, but for shorthand here, that's the story I'm hearing right now that they're talking about. What are you hearing?
Pretty much the same, or as Senator John Kavanaugh, who chairs the Senate Appropriations Committee, said the same. So that would be a little bit more for the governor's office. But right now, the only one of the three parties, the only one that seems to be really committed to this right now are the Senate Republicans. The House is balking a bit at that. I spoke with Representative Matt Gress, who's vice chair of the Appropriations Committee, is handling a lot of the budget stuff. He's talking about, maybe do the same, maybe do that, but maybe have the amounts lower. Maybe they could get to the full 90 for each chamber if they find some other places to pull some money from or get some more revenue from. But the House is not committed, and they've been kind of not super keen on that idea. Not quite sure where the governor's office is at. They didn't comment on kind of whether they supported that. But we saw this a couple of years ago to get the budget deal where all the members got a handful of cash to play around with for whatever their pet projects are in their district. Some of it ended up getting clawed back the next year. Yeah. Some of it, there was a rodeo. I think that was the subject of a lawsuit.
$15 million for the old Prescott rodeo. It's still being tied up in litigation.
It was still a court. There was there was maybe some bad press for lawmakers after that. So I think maybe that's contributing to some of the hesitancy. There's also the fact that there's a lot of unknowns with the budget. We don't know with the federal budget, the big beautiful bill as they call it, and the federal budget, is that going to cut some federal funding to the states that Arizona is going to have to recoup somewhere? What's going to happen with the economy? There's a lot of uncertainty. And so there's a lot of unknowns as they're trying to figure this out as well.
Yeah, I was going to kind of follow up on that, and you kind of answered that. I was like, how is this $90 million going to be divvied up in the chambers? Is it going to be divvied up like, give it to members to decide where they should appropriate this money? And given the fact that they did this a few years ago, and as you mentioned, some of that money was clawed back, those projects never got built, and some of it was tied up in litigation. Are lawmakers skeptical of this plan doing it again?
So from what I've heard from the House, some folks over there, some of the Republicans are. I think it would be just like a per member allocation, or per Republican member is what they're talking about now. I think they kind of look to the governor to handle whatever Democratic needs there are in the chambers. people could pool their resources together and go for larger projects. I think we saw legislative Democrats do that a couple of years ago. Representative Gress talked about wanting to focus on kind of like larger scale projects, and maybe he was worried that some of the money could detract from that, and not wanting to rely on members pooling their resources together for those projects. So all in all, it does not seem like a very insurmountable obstacle here. It seems like something they can figure out. They just need to talk it through, and obviously things got off to a pretty late start this year. Compared to most years, they had to deal with developmental disabilities funding, deal with some other issues, and it feels like they just kind of they were waiting for revenue projection to come. It seems like there was just it took them a long time to really get started.
And I think the word there is like uncertainty. You're talking about there's the big beautiful bill working through Congress. How is that going to affect Arizona? Where's the economy going to be? What are the numbers saying? My understanding is they can't even agree. The three of them down there can't even agree on how much money there is to spend. So that's always an issue. So, but it doesn't seem like it is insurmountable. It seems like some version of this plan will get passed, and then you'll basically go with a baseline type budget?
Probably, yeah. They're not going to, just because of all the uncertainty, they're not going to kind of get too out of control on new spending, I think. But yeah, not too insurmountable. I mean, we see this all the time where it's just, deadlock, and then one day, like, hey, we got a budget deal out of, and, seemingly out of the blue, but so much has been happening behind the scenes that, they've been working towards it for a while. So I'm sure we'll see it by then, see a budget by June 30th. I think Senator Kavanaugh said probably by then is the way he put it to me the other day. So maybe not as optimistic as you'd like, but it generally pretty much always happens by the end of the fiscal year.
So what's left to do? I mean, what big projects are out there that are left to get accomplished this year? We know the governor still giving her veto stamp a real hard workout again this year. I think she's up to vetoing about 38% of the bills that made it to her desk. Again, we got until this June 30th deadline. There's still, obviously, they got to get the budget done. But what else is out there? And one of the things I'm thinking about is that stadium deal for the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah, that stands out as kind of the biggest ticket item that still needs to be addressed. I mean, the legislature, they're not really coming to the Capitol very much these days because there's not a lot to do. That's something that there's a lot of negotiations going on behind the scene, trying to find something to provide some public funding for, Chase Field renovations that has been kind of intractable for a while. They haven't been able to figure that out, but I think there's going to be a big push to try and get that done by the end of the year. There's Proposition 123 renewal.
Well, that's gone back and forth, right?
Because
depends
which I don't know that we'll actually see. It doesn't have to happen this year. No matter what happens, it'll be on the ballot in November 2026. So if they need to take more time, they can take more time. They threw kind of a wrench into it with this demand that there be a provision in this proposed constitutional amendment that protects school choice programs as is, especially the Empowerment Scholarship Accounts program. That's been very controversial. I think they have not been able to. That's
kind of a poison pill if they go with that direction, at least for Democrats, correct?
Definitely a poison pill for Democrats, maybe for voters as well. I mean, the last time ESA expansion was on the ballot, we saw how poorly that fared. So I think we'll probably see that next year. When I spoke to Senator J.D. Mesnard recently, who was kind of leading the charge for that in the Senate, he put it at kind of 50-50 that something will happen this session. It seems like most of the folks I talked to feel like it's kind of a dead issue for 2025, and hey, see you in January 2026 and try it again. All
right, we'll have to end it right there. Jeremy Duda with Axios. Thanks for stopping by here. And still ahead, we'll bring in our panel to look at this week's major headlines, including the implosion of the relationship between President Trump and South African billionaire Elon Musk when Politics Unplugged continues. Welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Not long ago, President Trump and Elon Musk were palling around at the White House. Those days are over. Trump is threatening to end Musk's government contracts, and Musk says that Trump should be impeached and that he's on the Epstein list. So how did we get here? Let's bring in our panel. Republican consultant Marcus Dell'Artino and Democratic consultant Stacy Pearson. We'll start with you since you're the expert Republican here at the table. So Musk, this all starts because Musk takes the Twitter, X, the platform he owns, and starts criticizing the big, beautiful bill. And then it just spirals out of control in the coming days, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the rumor mill says that basically he got into a heated screaming match in the White House with the Secretary of the Treasury. The chief of staff for the president came out and said, I am done with this stuff, and it's one of you has to go. And the president's pick was Elon Musk got to go, and Elon didn't take that very well, as we can see.
And you got to be watching this as a Democrat with some popcorn, correct?
Absolutely.
Let's get your take on what was going on here, because I mean, on Thursday throughout the day, it was just like one bomb after another bomb. With again with Musk saying that Donald Trump was on the Epstein list, Trump saying that inferring that maybe Musk should be impeached. I mean, it got pretty nasty.
Well, beyond just as a Democrat watching, and honestly, this is not good for the country.
Yeah,
So yes, I'm watching with popcorn, but this isn't good for any of us. More importantly, I'm watching as a woman because we're the ones that are supposed to be too emotional to have the Oval Office, and there isn't a single candidate, female candidate, or elected official who's ever done anything like this. These boys need to be put in timeout, and their phones need to be taken away until they calm down, and maybe they write each other an apology, and then we put them back in the room together.
I'd also add that for anybody who spent more than 10 minutes in this business, if you didn't see this coming, you need to find a new line of work. Yeah. This has been in the works for a long time. It's been as clear as day what was coming, and now it's just playing out live.
But it doesn't beg the question. Did you expect, everybody kind of expected that there would be a breakup. There's two enormous egos at play here. Did you expect for it to get this nasty, though?
I'm not shocked, I will tell you that much. So to that end, I guess probably I'm not all that surprised. I mean, that's, as to your point, I mean, you're talking about two very large egos. And, certainly Elon Musk knows how Trump plays on electronic media, or the messaging, or whatever,
socials,
Twitter, social media. And so, he wants to try and match his game. And I got to tell you, it doesn't work like that. He's going to end up being on the losing side of this.
And let me ask you, though, but that does beg the question. Has Donald Trump kind of met his match in these kinds of games? Because we've seen him just take down politician after politician and people like that. But it seems like he's met somebody. He's not willing to back down. He's got his own enormous source of power.
Well, there used to be this adage, right? We're all old enough to remember you don't pick a fight with someone who owns ink by the barrel. Now it's, you don't pick a fight with someone who is the tail that wags the dog. I mean, when someone tweets something, when something is posted on X, from there, it actually affects traditional media. These are the stories then the people who still get the newspaper delivered to their door are reading. It is ugly.
And to Stacy's point, this was up within 4 minutes of that post being put up on social media. It was up on mainstream media within 4 minutes.
So is this just interesting political reality television, or does this have real world consequences?
I think right now it's a lot of political theatrics. We'll be talking about it for the next 10 days. But clearly, I mean, even as of this morning, they're talking about bridging an accord here, striking a peace deal. How that comes out will be interesting. But I think it'll just make for great political theater. But other than that, little to no effect. Yeah,
because I was thinking that any day now that these two could realize there's a lot at stake here. That each has a lot. And I also kind of thought that maybe the worst thing that Elon Musk could have said to Donald Trump wasn't like the Epstein list and all that. It was Musk taking credit for Trump's victory.
I got you elected. I thought that was really the dagger in this relationship, through the heart of this relationship. But what my team needs to focus on is this is really interesting and funny, and the memes are out of this world. But ultimately, there are people whose Medicaid is going to get cut who are going to die. So we need to stay focused on what matters. And I'm telling you that there are parents with children on Medicaid who do not care whether or not these guys like each other, but they do care whether or not their kids' chemo's covered.
Yeah, and talking about some of the political fallout from this, I mean, Republicans, Trump was really relying on Musk to pour in large amounts of money in the 2026 midterm elections. That at risk now? Do you think they could mend this and get back on track?
They could mend it, but what I will also tell you, and it's not being closely watched, is I think that Elon is looking to form a third party. And you look at some of his polling questions and he's been out asking, it's flirting with the idea of setting up a third party. And that would be then a disaster for both parties, Democratic Party and Republican Party. So that's what the insiders really need to be paying attention to.
Yes,
I mean, very good point.
Yeah, and if there is this big political breakup, this divorce, who wins Silicon Valley?
Oh, that's the question, right? I think it depends on how far Donald Trump reacts to what's happening now with X, because certainly Silicon Valley saw that there were reforms that need to be made that helped keep kids safer on social medias, and they had no interest in it, hence the Republican flip.
Yeah, and this has got fallout beyond just what's going on between those two. I mean, here in Arizona, after Musk had said that this is a bloated bill, the big beautiful bill, the budget bill, Andy Biggs took to Twitter or to X and agreed with Elon Musk. And Karen Taylor Robeson, who is, and we'll be talking more about that race in the next segment, is calling him out for that. I mean, those two are running against each other for the governor's race.
Yeah, I mean, the race for governor is tied to the White House. He endorsed both candidates, for God's sakes. I mean, and when you look at the federal bill that they are debating, it does have dramatic effects on the state of Arizona. And Andy Biggs has always been like the king of we are not running deficits. And so, although, he has a point, he has to understand politically that puts him at odds with the White House.
Yeah, that's
after
the
claiming
point, right?
that he just after he just claimed, well, I've got the president's phone number. Well, he's not going to take that very well.
Yeah, and of course, Karen Taylor Robeson, who has spent seven figures in ad buys to convince voters 17 months out that she's the real endorsed candidate and the one who's really Trump's pick. She, again, quick to seize on that, saying, hey, did you really, after voting for this, are you really saying you don't like President Trump's bill?
That I think is the most interesting political theater for Arizonans. Is these two are going to fight over who's the prettiest girl getting asked to the dance for the next 17 months.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. It's not anything I've ever seen a breakup like this that's been this public. Can you think of anything that's remotely like this, Marcus?
No. I mean, come on. You have the leader of the free world in a Twitter battle with a billionaire. I mean, this is almost like, I told somebody the other day, it reminds me a little bit of a James Bond movie, somehow. So no, we're in unprecedented times, but I feel like I say that every week on this show.
Yeah, and next week, maybe
Yeah.
next week we'll be at the table talking about how there's this amazing, big, beautiful reunion.
Right.
Who knows anymore? Things change all the time, and we're gonna have to take a quick break right now. But when we come back, a political fight in Arizona over who has President Trump's cell phone number. That's next on Politics Unplugged. To get more in-depth on the issues, check out the Politics Unplugged podcast. This week, we talked with consultants Tony Connie and Barrett Marson about the feud between Elon Musk and President Trump. The Politics Unplugged podcast drops every Sunday evening wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome back to Politics Unplugged. Republican primary race for governor looks like a battle to see who's closer to Donald Trump, with Andy Biggs boasting this week that he has the president's cell phone number. Let's bring the panel back in. Thanks for sticking around here. Andy Biggs, he was at his campaign launch, was hosted by Turning Point USA, and says he's the one, that it's one thing to be endorsed by the president, which they both are, but he says it's also another thing to have the president's personal cell phone number, and he says, he's emphatic, he says, and I got it. Is this just silliness, or is this, what's he trying to get out of this?
You know who else has his phone number? Kamala Harris. I mean, who cares? Elon Musk has his cell phone. Everybody's got President Trump's cell phone number. Well, I don't, but the comment seems to me like we're better friends than you are with Donald Trump, and ultimately in messaging, I'm not too sure that's going to pan out all that great when you play that against the fact that he's had some comments against the big beautiful budget bill. One of those is going to weigh out a little bit greater, I can guarantee you, in the president's mind.
All right. Biggs during that event, too, also raised some interesting topics. He's kind of going down the old Doug Ducey route. He says he wants to get rid of the state income tax. Is that an issue? Is that something that Katie Hobbs, if Biggs was to go on and win the primary, is that a fight that Hobbs wants to have in a general election?
Well, Arizona's tax rate is among the lowest. And so this isn't an issue on the top of mind for voters right now. I mean, certainly cost of goods, cost of services, everything, inflation, cost of housing, all of those are the issues. But whether or not you're whatever your marginal rate is, that's not the issue that voters are most upset about. So I think Andy Biggs is missing the point that we have roads that are too clogged, that have too many potholes. We have climate change and forests that need help. We've got a DPS that's underfunded with vacancies they can't fill. We've got a Department of Corrections that have locks that need to be fixed. All of those things require tax revenue to fix. And so we cannot rely on the federal government to backfill for us.
And is this the kind of issue that separates himself like in a primary election? I mean, Doug Ducey ran on this. Remember when he said he wanted to get rid of the income tax before amending that, saying that he wanted to get the income tax down to as low as possible. He went on to win 2 terms.
Yeah, and obviously it worked. Arizona's a flat tax state now at 2.5%, roughly 2.5%. And so we've got one of the lowest tax rates. It will not be the argument that gets him elected, I will tell you that. We're certainly still on immigration, number one. Number two, as a fiscal policy, I will tell you that there are other taxes that would be better to cut that stimulate growth in the economy other than the income tax, which is already at such a low point that I don't think that your value bang for your buck would be better on a different tax. And,
when Biggs took the stage for that Turning Point USA event, it was packed house, about 1,000 people there. Does crowd size matter?
I would like to say no, it doesn't, but certainly it has. And we've seen that over the last couple of elections, right? And so the list that Turning Point has and their ability to turn people out who do actually vote based on information they feed them is important, particularly in Republican primaries. And so it does matter. And certainly if I was Karen Taylor Robeson's team, I'd be worried.
Yeah, and any other takeaways from Biggs, his first kind of a campaign launch? Any other takeaways that you noted?
I think, if you go back a couple of weeks, we sort of talked about this, how these campaigns are going to shape up. And Karen's campaign is going to be, one, self-funded, but also 2, out getting contributions from Arizonans and people across the nation. Mr. Biggs is going to be reliant on Turning Point to run his campaign. And so he won't be doing, I don't think, the traditional phone calls asking for, $1,000 checks, whereas Karen will.
Yeah, and I think they're already out, Turning Point out with a $500,000 ad buy on targeted ads for Biggs and stuff like that. But been waiting to ask you this question because I know you love talking about this. Looks like Senator Ruben Gallego got himself in a little bit of trouble with his progressive base this past week when he said that he believes that transgender athletes in girls' sports, he says that's a legitimate issue and an area of legitimate concern. Now, people are looking at this and saying, this is not the Ruben we voted for.
So, this is the Ruben you voted for. I mean, that is, and it was the cinema you voted for. This is exactly who you voted for in a Democratic minority state. You voted for someone who's going to govern for all. And there's no place in childhood activities that are more segregated than sports. We segregate by gender, we segregate by age. And the people who are criticizing Ruben right now, I want to know if they ever played sports. Is leveling up just apply to your video games? Or does it also apply to competitive youth sports? Because there's a reason when you turn 15, you can't play with the 12-year-olds. There's a reason when you turn 18, you can't play with the 15-year-olds. I mean, this is what happens, and segregating kids based on their size and their hormones is how it works.
And, what's your take on this? I mean, again, people are saying Ruben's starting to sound a lot politically and look a lot politically like Kyrsten Sinema. Pretty standard, though, for politicians who all of a sudden find themselves governing an entire state, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm giggling about the whole thing, but it is the difference in between, being a congressman from a district that's got a 30-point Democratic edge, for God's sakes, to being a statewide candidate in a Republican-leaning state. So, wow, his policy statements might have changed, but I will tell you, I do find some irony in there that we just crucified Kyrsten Sinema. The progressives on the left, essentially kicked her out of the Democratic Party. And here comes Ruben with this statement. And from my standpoint, I think it's been a little quiet. But I expect more in the future. And I think that we're going to get to a point where the Democrats have to reevaluate, which is be shocking, but you have to reevaluate the messaging in the Democratic Party.
All right, for once you get the last word here. That is all the time we have. Be sure to join us next week for more Politics Unplugged.